I'm standing next to the Oder river at a place called Siadło Dolne, which is to the south of Szczecin. This far, well, this close to the sea, I should say, the Oder river has broken up into a number of distributaries, and here this is the western distributary, the western Oder, but there's an eastern one and others as well. The river has been poisoned. I'm going to tell you about it here, and I'm going to have to shout as well to make myself heard over the racket. Let's turn the camera around. That's more interesting than looking at me. So here we can see the river, how wide it is. So the western one is about as wide as the eastern one as well. You can see huge body of water here just to the south of Szczecin. Towards the end of July, some fishing people, they were doing it for fun, some sports fisher people, noticed a lot of dead fish, and then increasingly more and more dead fish were turning up. Indeed, it looked as though this river was on the verge of an ecological disaster, the worst ecological disaster to happen in Poland for many years. In fact, probably since Chernobyl, which of course was then in the Soviet Union. Now, in many places there were tons and tons, huge amounts of dead fish were turning up. In fact, there's one photograph of a Wels catfish which was almost as long as a person, 170 centimeters I think it was, being thrown into a skip. Now that was the thing that really stood out for me about this huge Wels catfish. I think was the first time one had ever been seen that large in this river. I stand to be corrected, of course, on that one. The cause of this ecological disaster at the time I'm speaking of now is still not known. So if you see this in the future, you won't really, probably the real reason will be known. I'm going to talk about some things which may have caused this disaster. Now the first thing is, it could be completely natural. Things like this happen and we don't always know the reason for them. The second thing though, and the most logical thing, is that it was an industrial accident, and this was the first theory, but no lead, for example, was found in the river whatsoever. Now one thing that I suggested, that it could be a historical industrial accident. It could have been from materials which were produced here alongside this river during the Second World War. Nazi produced had a number of factories producing chemicals in the region of Opole, amongst other things, and that, maybe some weapon or something like that, that got into the water, and it only takes 1 part per millions and millions to have caused this damage. Now that is of course a theory. Now I personally think the most logical, and bear in mind I don't know, the most logical reason for what's happened here is this is algae. It's a type of algae which has poisoned the water, but doesn't necessarily poison anybody or anything, I should say, that may eat the fish that it poisoned. I think I have to explain that in more detail. Now the algae, it's likely to have formed because, first of all, the temperature of the river, the water on some days reached 27 degrees. Furthermore, the water levels have been dropping, which means there is less oxygen, which brings me onto the racket right here. What's going on here is they're putting, by moving the water around, you've got two pumps and it's moving from one pump to the other, so the water is moving around. And the fact that I'm actually standing here risking getting splashed, and we've got the kids out and all the rest of it, shows that they can't, the authorities can't believe it is particularly dangerous. So we've got so that if it moves around, again, this is just my theory, then it's going to lower the water temperature, and also if the water starts moving, then the algae, I believe, are less likely to form. Now let's return to the idea of the disaster. So this is the second largest river flowing into the Baltic Sea, the biggest being the Vistula. And now the Oder starts in Czechia, but most of the time it's in Poland, in some places on the Polish-German border. In this case, at the very north, like where I am, it's uniquely in Poland, and in the south it's also uniquely in Poland. Then obviously it's uniquely in Czechia, in Czechia just for a tiny bit. Now the Baltic Sea, if you have a look at the map, you will notice that Denmark sticking up rather stops the water coming in and out, flowing in and out. In fact, the Baltic Sea sort of it cleans itself out once every 30 years. Yeah, I'll walk away a little bit so I won't have to shout so much. So the Baltic, if this then got into the Baltic, they've got the entire Baltic then is contaminated. Why did it take, is it taking so long to know what the cause of this disaster is? Now this is strange, isn't it? You think they could do some post-mortems on the fish that turn up. But then again, I'm sure they've been thinking about that and doing plenty of them. But anyway, they weren't able to find out what the cause of all these deaths were. Here we've got some black bags, and in these black bags are dead fish. There's people going out in boats, filling them up with fish and then bringing in. Now this is really, that's nothing compared to the amount of fish that was being seen on the news and things of this nature, where they had whole skips full of dead fish. They wouldn't put them in bags but in skips, and they had barrages across the river, so these like inflatable things, and that would catch the fish, and then they would sort of pull it out the barrage, because the dead fish obviously float to the surface. And yet another ecological problem, which seemed to be a problem, what dead fish get eaten by other wildlife, and then there's the risk of them getting poisoned, and whatever eats them getting poisoned, and up the entire food chain to the top. And in some countries, or from many places, it is, for example, birds of prey, or eagles and all the rest of it, which suffer more, because the more it goes up, it actually increases the toxicity. Don't understand the reason for that, but that is what it can do in some cases. So there you have it, a little news story about what is happening here on the Oder River. And I know this isn't a news channel, but I don't happen to have one on environmental issues or anything like that, so that's why I have done this now. Now I suspect that in time we will know the cause of this, and so this will make it all the more interesting. If anybody's got any ideas, of course, they can always write it down in the comments below. I don't suppose any experts will be looking at it at this site, but who knows, somebody might have an idea as to what caused this disaster to happen. And please bear in mind, I don't really know. I know a little bit about vertebrates. I know nothing about algae. If I remember rightly, the name of the golden algae, I think it's called in English. I think the genus is Parvedus. I think, although I'm not certain. I can't remember. So I hope you found that interesting. I don't think there'll be anything more on this subject on this channel, but if you are interested, of course you might want to subscribe, because normally I do things related to other subjects. Thanks very much for watching, and all the best from me in Siadło Dolne, 21st of August 2022. I don't know why these paddling pools are here. Maybe it's to put live fish in. I don't know if I find any. Don't know.